Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to tackle something that impacts literally all of us. How to stop just, reading information and start actually learning it. We're going to talk about how to move from being a passive consumer to an active builder of knowledge. It's going to completely change how you study. Let's get right into it.
So, does this sound familiar? You've put in the hours, you've gone through an entire highlighter, you feel like you've done the work, but the next day, when you try to remember what you studied, poof, it's just gone. It is one of the most frustrating feelings in the world for a student, right?
Well, here's the thing. The truth is, if you're struggling to remember what you study, it's probably not a bad memory. The problem isn't your brain, it's your process. And you know what the good news is? Your process is something we can totally fix, starting right now.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about preparing your brain for learning. Then we'll get into how to spot what's actually important. After that, we'll cover how to build deep, meaningful connections. And finally, how to lock that knowledge in for good. We'll wrap it all up with a simple toolkit you can start using immediately. First up, activating what you know. Seriously, think of this like warming up before you work out. It's this absolutely essential first step that almost everybody skips, but it makes everything that comes after it so much easier. So what does this actually mean? Well, it means that before you even read the first sentence of a chapter, you just take a second to pull up everything you already know about that topic. It's kind of like telling your brain, hey, get the file for World War II ready, because we're about to add some new stuff to it. That existing mental file, that's what experts call your schema. And here's a fantastic way to think about it. Imagine trying to build a 1,000-piece puzzle, but you've never, ever seen the picture on the box. It would be an absolute nightmare, right? You just have a pile of random pieces? Well, activating your prior knowledge is like studying that picture on the box first. Once you see the big picture, organizing all the little individual pieces becomes so much more manageable. And why does it work so well? The benefits are huge. It points your attention to what's important, so you don't get sidetracked. It actually makes your processing faster because your brain is already anticipating the ideas. It gives you a mental framework to handle really complex stuff, and it helps you give meaning to new facts instead of just seeing them as this random list you have to memorize. And look, this isn't some complicated theory. You can literally do this tonight. Before you start reading, just skim the chapter headings and the summary. Glance over your notes from last week. Take just 60 seconds to brainstorm any words you can think of related to the topic. These super simple actions get your brain ready to learn effectively. Okay, so your brain is all warmed up and ready to go. Now it's time to actually engage with the material. But this leads us to a huge common trap, the idea that highlighting is the same thing as learning. As we're about to see, it's really not. Just look at this comparison. Passive highlighting, which we've all done, is usually just random. We mark stuff that looks important, but we aren't really thinking. It feels productive, right? But the research is crystal clear. It does not improve your memory. Active selecting, on the other hand, is intentional. You're using that prior knowledge we just talked about as a filter, helping you separate the really crucial information from all the fluff.
And this is the perfect example of the danger of not being selective. For years, psychology textbooks had this picture of the famous psychologist Jean Piaget riding a bicycle. Years later, researchers found that students remembered that bicycle, they remembered it vividly, but they couldn't recall his groundbreaking theories of child development. The bike was a seductive detail. It was interesting, sure, but it was completely irrelevant to what they needed to learn.
So how do you get better at selecting the right stuff? You look for the hidden structure. See, academic information isn't just a random pile of facts. It's organized, and authors leave clues for you. If you start seeing words like leads to or causes, you know you're looking at a cause and effect relationship. If you see, on the other hand, it's a comparison. Spotting these patterns is like finding a blueprint for your notes.
All right, this next part, this is the absolute heart of real lasting learning. So far, we've prepped our brain and we've selected the key ideas. But now, we have to do something with them. This is all about building knowledge, not just collecting it.
The fancy term for this is generative processing, and all it means is the act of creating connections that aren't spelled out for you in the text. It's when you ask yourself, why? It's when you come up with your own examples. It's when you link a new idea to an old one. This is the difference between just repeating a definition and truly, deeply understanding it. And let's be super clear about this. If you skip this step, you aren't really learning. You might be busy, you might be rereading your notes for hours, but you are not building durable, long-lasting knowledge.
The bottom line is that real learning requires active construction, not just passive review.
So, how do we actually do this? Well, here are some incredibly powerful and practical strategies. As you're reading, just keep asking yourself, why is this true? Or how does this connect to that thing I learned last week? Try to come up with your own real-world examples for abstract concepts. And maybe the best test of all, try to teach it to someone else. Honestly, even just explaining it out loud to yourself is an absolute game changer.
Okay, let's move on to our final big stage, rehearsal. This is how we make sure that all this hard work we've done actually sticks around for the long haul. And I want to be very, very clear about something. Rehearsal is not cramming.
Yeah, rehearsal is not about trying to learn everything from scratch the night before the test. It's not about passively rereading your highlights again and again. True rehearsal is an active process of pulling information out of your memory, which is what strengthens the pathways to get to it. And this comparison really gets to the science of why cramming just doesn't work. Cramming, it keeps information in this temporary holding pattern in your brain. It creates an illusion that you know it, but the real neural pathways aren't being built. On the flip side, distributed practice, studying in shorter, spread-out sessions over time, forces your brain to work harder to retrieve that information. And that effort, that's what builds strong, long-lasting memories. Now, get ready for one of the most surprising and counterintuitive findings in learning science. Students who just reread their notes often become overconfident, right? Because the material feels familiar. But here's the kicker. They actually remember less. Meanwhile, students who use practice tests often feel underconfident because they're constantly seeing what they don't know yet. But on the actual exam, they remember significantly more. It just goes to show that testing isn't just for grades, it's one of the most powerful learning tools we have.
All right, we have covered a ton of ground, from prepping your mind and selecting ideas to building meaning and rehearsing so you'll remember. So let's wrap this all up into a simple, practical toolkit that you can literally start using tonight.
And here it is, the whole process in a nutshell. Before you learn, activate. While you're learning, select and organize. To make it really sink in, generate those connections. And to keep it for the long term, rehearse with spaced practice and lots of self-testing. This isn't just a list of random tips, it's a complete, evidence-based system for actually learning. And that brings us to the final, and honestly, the most important step, putting this into action. So I'll leave you with this one question. Based on everything we've just talked about, what is the one single habit that you will change, starting today? Because that one small change could make all the difference. Thanks for joining me.